This is the Hiking Through Life podcast. We've all been gifted a journey called life. Let's see where the journey leads us today. Welcome to the Hiking Through Life podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Sarah.
And in today's journey, we talk with John and Terry Binkele, creators of the board game Trekking the National Parks. They created this game with their son Charlie Binkele, and Charlie's had a history of game design, and their whole family has been trekking the national parks, if you will, in real life for quite some time.
Yeah, and we first discovered the game Trekking the National Parks this summer. We brought it with us on our road trip, and we played when we were out in Yellowstone National Parks. And it's a super fun game, highly recommended for anyone, and it's very adaptable to all ages. I've seen pictures of kids playing it, adults playing it. Super fun game, and we played it while at Yellowstone, so super appropriate.
Yeah, we played it with your parents, introduced them to it. They had a fun time playing it.
Yeah, and the game, I loved the box too because it has a picture of John and Terry's and their son Charlie on the box and has a little bio about their family, and that was really intriguing to me to kind of learn more about their story and how they came about this game. So that's when we got in touch with them.
We had the pleasure of talking over Skype with them and just hearing, like Sarah had mentioned, about their history of their outdoors and trekking through the national parks and visiting all of these parks.
Yeah, and they're still super active and going to parks, and now they have this goal to complete the parks in Arizona.
Yeah, all of the nationally designated parks, monuments, and historical sites within the state of Arizona.
So, super inspiring couple, and we hope that through the interview you are inspired to get outdoors because age is just a number. So, without further ado, enjoy our interview with the Binkeles. We are joined on the podcast today by John and Terry Binkele, and we are so excited to have them on the podcast. So, thank you for joining today, guys.
You're welcome. Thank you.
John and Terry Binkele have explored all 61 national parks, and they also have created the board game Trekking the National Parks, which we discovered this summer and fell in love with the board game. And we wanted to connect with them and hear their story about trekking the national parks. So before we get into the board game part of it, we just want to hear your guys' story about how the outdoors kind of became a hobby for you guys and the national parks, trekking, all of that. So was that, has that always been a core of your relationship, the outdoors?
Well, yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, me, when I was small, we camped a lot in Yosemite. Terry's family was outdoors, water skiing, etc. So the outdoors have always been part of our lives. When we met, the same thing. We took the kids camping quite a bit. The way the whole national park thing came about was in 2009, Terry and I went to seek some help with a financial planner. And the financial planner says, I can't figure out your financial plan until you figure out your life plan. So she made us do some heavy thinking about what was important to us. And out of that came a goal to visit, at the first goal was to visit 40 national parks in 40 months. And the reason that came about is in 2009, two significant events took place. Number one, we saw a really stupid movie called 2012, which was about the end of the world according to the Mayan calendar. Also in 2009, my birthday was 999, okay? And so when we were trying to figure out the life plan, I thought, well, how many months are there between September 9 of 09 and the end of the world? There was
12.
Yeah, 12. There's 40 months. So Terry wrote down part of our life plan to go visit 40 parks in 40 months. We were in Hawaii Volcanoes at this beautiful resort called the Kilauea Lodge having dinner. And we said, well, we're way ahead of schedule, Terry. Now what are we going to do? And she said, well, let's visit all of them. And I said, really? At that time, there were 58 national parks. And as you folks probably know, there's a few of them that are pretty darn remote, Kobuk Valley and the Gates of the Arctic, and two in particular. So she said, let's do it. So we amended our life plan to visit all 58 parks. In 2013, Binkeles came on board, which was number 59. And we ended up completing number 59 in September of 2017 with a journey over to American Samoa.
And the significance of the national parks was also the goal to stay very healthy and getting out and camping, not an RVing, and not that that's not a great thing for people who need to do that, but we felt we loved the tent, that real on the earth experience, and by also getting out and hiking was keeping us healthy, keeping up with just whatever our normal pace would be and building our stamina. And the more we were out there, the more we enjoyed it.
Right. Here, you guys retired, or was that coming up upon your retirement?
We were both working when we started the journey. But Terry, when did you retire, Terry?
I retired in 2014. Right. So we still had 3 more years to finish out the national parks that our goal was. But retiring from my career of being a flight attendant, but starting the career of creating our company to create our board game. So that went into another full-time kind of job for our family.
Yeah, so the board game. So when you started doing all these parks as your goal to do all of them, did you have this board game in mind, or where were you when that board game idea came to you?
Oh, again, our son Charlie has been an artist and a game designer for all of his life, and every Sunday we would have dinner and family game night, and so we were playing games for the last 10, 15 years. I distinctly remember in March of 13, I woke up, 2013, we'd visited like 40 parks at that stage of the game. I woke up one morning, a Monday morning, because it was the night after game night, and I thought, we need to make a game about these national parks. So I ran it up, by Terry, and she thought it was a great idea. We called Charlie up, and we kind of pitched him on the thought. He loved the theme, and so we started play testing a bunch of different versions of the game for about 14 months, and ended up doing a Kickstarter campaign. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Kickstarter, but we did a Kickstarter campaign in the summer of 14, had a successful program with that, and ended up publishing the game in 14. But the game really evolved midway through our journey, or 2/3 of the way through our journey to the parks. It didn't happen from the beginning.
And Charlie has, again, been very active in visiting the parks as he was growing up with us. And at that point, though, in 13, he was already out on his own. However, his gaming started very young. Every Thursday night with his buddies from high school, would get together and do a game night, and it was not electronics because they felt there was no real communication or interaction with each other if they were all just sitting there on electronic devices. So doing the game night really evolved for him with better relationships with the friends, and anything that he played with his buddies that he thought would be a great grandma game, he would bring over to us, because the idea for him in regards to a grandma game, I think it's simple enough for a grandma to learn, most adults would enjoy it also. So he also had a background when he finished college, was working for artists and publishing companies in their art department. So always had a infinity for that.
Yeah, and it looked like your game, Trekking the National Parks, looks like it was developed through Underdog Games. So is that who he's working for right now?
No, it was developed. We formed a company called Bink Inc. LLC. And so we published the game first of all. As a family business, we'd run its course through. We met a young man named Hassan Hassami, who had a really good run selling games on Amazon. He wanted us to hire him to take the game to the next level. But at this stage, Terry and I are both retired, and we're thinking, well, we're really not that interested in promoting the game that actively as anymore. So we asked Hassan if he would be interested in licensing the game from us, and it was a package deal. He got the license. He also got Charlie, and that happened in 2018. And quite frankly, the two of them exploded the game through social media. Hassan knew how to develop the correct ads that in placement in Facebook, and created the websites and just all the social media stuff that folks like us are not real familiar with, and the game has just gone nuts from there. But they've only had it for now. This is their second year.
Coming
up on their first year. Where they've had the game. So.
But as a family, Charlie, John, and I created again Bink Inc. So for 6 years, right? 6 years or so, we were the impetus to get it going.
Right.
Okay. That was the core part of it. And just wrapping back to the whole how you have been exploring with Charlie, is he your only child, or is there other kids that are involved when you were going to any of these national parks with him?
Well, our daughter Tasha visited some of the parks with us. In fact, one of the most memorable experiences is when the four of us hiked to the top of Half Dome in Yosemite. And if you're familiar with that, there's a cable that goes from the base to the top. It's very, very steep. It's very, very scary. And I remember both Terry and Tasha were behind Charlie and I. Charlie was like 10, and he was like a spider crawling up the cable quickly, no fear whatsoever. And I look behind me, and here's Terry and Tasha basically crying, "Help me!"
We did make it to the top.
We made it to the top and made it. It's easier going up than coming down. Coming down is even scarier than going up.
But Tasha's married now.
Yeah, I've seen videos.
Yeah,
it looks scary.
Yeah.
But Tasha's married now, and they have 2 children of their own, and they have a fifth wheel, and they go camping, and they're visiting the parks and all of the state parks also a lot. They're very much into the outdoors.
Awesome. So you guys said Yosemite was very memorable. Would you say that was one of your favorite national parks you visited out of all of them?
It would probably be my favorite, yes. Very first experience in the national parks was in Yosemite, camping along the Merced River. So that would be my number one park.
It's high on my list also. As a child, we made lots of trips up to Oregon where my mother's family was from. So we went to the Oregon Caves, we went to Crater Lake and things like that, but it's very memorable. Zion National Park, though, ranks above my top because we went there for the first time for me. We went there during our treks to do all of the national parks, all 8 at the time. And the first time driving into Zion, it was just, for me, awe-inspiring. So it's high on my list also. But Yosemite's right there, too.
Oh, yeah, Zion's definitely on our list. Was there a lot of snow when you guys were exploring that park?
No, not really. We went in the summer months, so the snow level was we visited Bryce Canyon in the winter, which was just absolutely stunning. So, and that's one of the Utah's Mighty 5 parks.
Yeah. I was looking at a lot of the pictures on your guys' website of all your it kind of like the trip planning that you've made for people, almost the guide. Those pictures are incredible. So was that website something you guys were making all along the way of your parks, or did that come after the board game?
Actually, the first copy of the first 2 editions of the game came with a park guidebook, and this is a document I put together. And it's the website is now just this version online, basically. But it was I took a lot of the photographs that we used in the game and in the guidebook, and this was kind of the educational component of the game to begin with. And so what we did is, rather than print's expensive, is we just converted this document onto the website. So if somebody wants to, basically it's the same thing if you look into it. It's, a little bit about each of the parks. It's pictures that I took. It's information about where to stay, what to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we
took that guidebook that was included in the game, and put it on the website once Underdog licensed our game.
Right.
And they repackage it and they refer to going to the website.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So that's how it all worked out. Awesome. Awesome. There's a lot of components going on here. I love hearing all of that. So cool. So, and Voyagers, tell us a little bit about when you guys visited Voyagers. What did you think of that? And was that your first time in Minnesota?
Not our first time in Minnesota, but first time to Voyagers. That trip, we went to Isle Royale first. We flew into Minneapolis and we drove up to whatever the port was that we went to, Isle Royale via the boat. And then from there, we went up to Voyagers. So we didn't camp on that trip. We stayed at
the different lodges.
And so Voyagers really, what we learned before we went there is that you need to get out on the water. I mean, it's really, Voyagers is about the water. And so we took a tour, a boat cruise out to Kettle Falls and the dam. And that was very fascinating. It was pretty much an all-day event, and anybody who goes to Voyagers should take at least some sort of a cruise out there on the lakes. There are canoe excursions, etc. There's a lot to do. There's actually hiking too. In fact, Voyagers, from what we remember, they have a Hike for Health program, which encourages people to get outdoors and hike and then record their journeys that they go. And I think there's some sort of a little badge or something after you complete a certain number of them. I'm not sure if that program's still in effect, but that was part of what we learned when we were at Voyagers.
Huh, neat. Yeah, I know that the Minnesota State Parks have like a passport program to encourage people to get out and hike, but Voyagers, that's somewhere we haven't been yet, and we're here in Minnesota, so we need to get up there too.
Yes, you should. It's actually a very pretty park.
It's beautiful.
It's spread out over a number of different areas. We were in we went up to the Rainy Lake area, and then that Lake K, I forgot how to pronounce it. And then there's other areas as well, but it's a very nice park.
Yeah, that's absolutely what we've heard. Did you see any wildlife when you were up there?
Probably the most significant wildlife was the bald eagles. There were hundreds of them perched in the trees when we were cruising
nesting
around. Yeah, nesting. Yeah, it was quite the sight.
Yeah, really neat. And then you said that you did a cabin when you were there, but previously you said most of the other parks you were doing camping.
Yeah. Most of the parks that we could drive to, we camped. Most of the parks are west of the Mississippi, and so we drove to pretty much all of those and camped mostly every one of those. The more remote ones, like Isle Royale, we didn't take we didn't pack our backpack stuff and jump on a plane and go there. We stayed in the cabin there. But I would say that 2/3 of the parks that we visited, we camped. The other third, we stayed in either outside of the park, like in Acadia, we stayed outside of the park. Great Smokies, we stayed just outside of the park in a hotel, and then day hiked, from there.
And some of the places also have cabins in the different national parks that are part of the national park experience. So we would stay in the little lodges or cabins that they would have, especially up in Alaska, where you had to take float planes to get someplace. Katmai was a little tiny little tiny cabin, 10 feet by 12 feet, and you had bunk beds in it and doors, and there are the bears walking right by on the pathway.
Really? Oh boy.
Really?
Well, yeah, that's Alaska for you. What an experience. Oh, wow. And then the trivia that you guys have in the game, was trivia something that your family was always interested in as well, or was that something that you decided on after you decided the game was going to come about?
Well, once we published the game, we did a lot of art fairs and little conventions and such, and people just demonstrated the game to interested parties. And a lot of the questions we got were, is there trivia involved? And at that stage of the game, there really wasn't any trivia involved. And so I sort of tested people with different trivia questions, like what was the first national park? And I'd get, blank stares. And and that's an easy one. I mean, that's basically
Yellowstone.
Exactly. So you got that trivia question right. So we learned right away that most people didn't have any clue and that's part of the reason for the park guidebook is we decided to create a document that would actually help educate people on some of these parks that we have.
And also in the game Trekking the National Parks, we noticed that some of the parks were eliminated from the game, obviously because there wasn't enough room on the board game.
Well, two things. Number one, game mechanics, it involves a lot of math, and 42, the number 42 worked very well. So what we had to decide was what were the top 42 parks that we would include. And then it's a space availability deal. Like in Utah, there's 5 parks that are virtually right next to each other. So we had to decide which of those 5 parks we would include in the game, and which did we it's on the board, but it doesn't have us, you can't actually trek to that. I don't know, Bryce might be on there, but
no, all the parks other than the last 2 that were just made national parks, which was Indiana Dunes National Park and Gateway Arch National Park, that have just recently been upgraded to national park status. All other parks are on the board. Some of them are just designated as a little diamond, which adds to the second part of our game, which was the park cards, the specialty parks, to get some points. But they're all represented there. Just 42 of them are where you're actually moving to
where you can trek to.
Trek to.
There's really more or less a spacing issue, because the size of the board is large compared to most board games. And then even with that, with the number of parks, at the time it was 59 when we created it.
And now there's 61.
Yeah, actually, the original concept that we came up with was we were only going to do 40 parks west of the Mississippi. And our neighbor at the time was from North Carolina, and she says, John, Terry, if you guys don't put Great Smoky Mountains on there, I'm not buying your game. So we thought, well, maybe it makes sense. And she said her argument was there's, the large population on the East Coast. Now, here's a trivia question. How many national parks are there east of the Mississippi?
This game, I remember this one, 14.
That's pretty close.
My husband just told me that answer. We looked at that map for a long time when that trivia question was up.
Actually, maybe 14 now, because
they are 14 now.
Yeah.
With the new parks.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so we ended up expanding it to incorporating all of the parks into the game. And again, some of them are actual, parks that you can trek to, but the other ones are just designated on the board.
Has there ever been a demand for you guys to create a new game that has all the national parks on it, or is that something you've thought of?
Well, we've been asked that all the time. In fact, we have people say, "Hey, you don't have my national park on your board." And we go, which park is that? Well, Sleeping Bear Dunes. And we go, okay, Sleeping Bear Dunes is part of the national park system, but it's a lakeshore. It's not one of the major national parks. So it's, it's a matter of, when we did this, because Terry and I's goal was to visit the major national parks, we decided that that's what we would limit the game to.
Right here in Arizona, what do we have?
21 of the
national parks, monuments, historical sites. That's our goal, to finish visiting all of the national park sites that are listed in the registry of the National Park Service. So there are 21, and we've visited probably 13 so far. So some of them are just day trips, go down to Tucson from where we are, 3 hours down, visit down there, spend the day in the area and come back. And others will require getting on the road, going for a couple of days to the far corners of our state.
Yeah. So I got to ask, when you guys went to visit the Grand Canyon National Park, did you guys go down there and do the camping for a few days?
We visited the canyon several times because it's in our backyard, just like Voyagers is for you.
Yeah, which we haven't even been to, unfortunately.
No, we've been to the canyon, I don't know, probably 10, 15 times, camping, lodging. We actually hiked rim to rim. We started on the North Rim. We camped in the North Rim, and they got up bright and early that morning. We hiked down. We actually stayed down at Phantom Ranch, overnight at Phantom Ranch, and then hiked out the other side of the rim the next day. And then I got the crazy idea that I needed to hike rim to rim in a day. So 2 of my buddies and I decided to do that, and we hiked the whole 23.5 miles in a single day.
Oh, that's strenuous, and it had to have been really hot.
Yeah, it's quite the hike.
But with us when John and I did it from the rim to rim with the camping down at Phantom Ranch, it gave us the opportunity to make side trips down at the bottom over to Ribbon Falls and along some of the offshoot little hikes that they have down there. It's a very different appreciation of how spectacular and grand that Grand Canyon really is when you get down into it.
Yeah. Again, something that we've never done. I've only hiked a little bit down. We didn't have the gear at all when I was there, but goals for life. Oh, that's awesome. So do you have anything else you would like to add about your game, or any last tips for listeners?
The game was inspired by our travels, but what we try to do is create something that was entertaining, educational, and inspiring. I mean, we wanted people to get out and explore our country's parks and really get out of their car and hike. We didn't really do a whole bunch of backpacking. Most of it, our hiking was day hikes, but we'd spend pretty much every day going out on some trail. So that was really the whole method to the madness. And then in doing so, it was accomplishing one of the life plan goals that we had established.
And most of the parks have hiking paths or paths that people with disabilities and everything can get out there and visit, which I think is really important for everyone.
Yeah, accessibility.
Yeah,
that's a huge thing, and that's kind of what we were going to ask you next. Like, what kind of advice do you have for people to get out and go to the parks? Just people of all ages. How can people access that best?
Well, the parks are pretty accessible. Most of the parks are pretty accessible to everybody. Again, some require a lot more. Getting to Gates of the Arctic wasn't easy, okay, or Cobic Valley, but most of the continental parks you can drive to, and they have facilities that are available for all ages. And again, the hiking is for very easy hikes. They have easy hikes to very difficult hikes. So it's the wide ranges. Cuyahoga Valley, which isn't too far from where you're at. The towpath.
Yeah, we went there.
Yeah, the towpath trail there is a gigantically wide trail where you can bike, hike. We saw people, strollering their kids and hiking or walking their dogs. And so it's a huge trail. It's flat. It's very easy. And then you have extremes like climbing to the top of Half Dome.
But throughout Yosemite, throughout Zion, again, the majority of the parks we went to, there were very easy, quarter-mile little hikes along paved trails that anyone and everyone can take, to more extreme type of things where people wanted to really get out in the wilderness and do the backpacking and take your tent with you and be out in the wilderness for days. So,
well, one of the things, again, for me, it inspired me. I saw a speaker years and years and years ago, and his comment has stuck with me, and it's health is the first wealth. And so really part of my being is to stay healthy, because I'm not any good to Terry or my family if I'm not healthy. And so health is the first wealth really plays a large part of our getting outdoors and getting outside and it's experiencing, nature, number one, but also walking is very good for you. So we like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's just like the fact that you can go and you don't need to trek to a national park. People can just go to their backyards, and these parks, they're all around, and that's going to improve your health so much. So it's inspiring. So just getting out and walking every day, I think that you guys are huge inspiration for people, and I'm hoping that listeners find you guys inspiring as well.
Well, we do too.
Hope so too.
If people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you? And can you share your website as well?
Well, the website is trektheparks.com. You can email me at johnbinkele@me.com.
But also to our personal blog. Trek?
The blog is it's Trek Tracks, TrekTrax.blogspot.com. That's got, I don't know, 90 different posts that we've done over time. And again, this is more, the Trek Tracks blog is more personal experiences rather than just informational, sort of what Terry and I did at each of these parks.
Oh, okay. More like some of your trip reports, sharing the personal stories rather than not like the guidebook that you've created.
Right. It's a way for us to let our family and friends know, kind of like what you were saying, and how your blog got started, to inform everyone.
Yeah. Keep your adventures going and connected with family and friends.
Right.
Awesome.
And of course, it's a great reminder of going back and reliving the experience that we had.
Yeah. And then that just inspires you to get out and keep doing it, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, it's been really awesome to have you guys. We're really thankful for this time with you, and we look forward to playing your game more.
Yeah, great. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hearing the Binkeles story was a reminder that with some hard work and perseverance, anything is possible. And it also has us dreaming of visiting all the national parks and continuing to play their board game.
It was really cool to hear the backstory of how they came up with the concept of this game, Trekking the National Parks, and how they set this goal of visiting all of the national parks. Originally, it was 40, but then they decided to just go for them all. And I think that is a really awesome endeavor. And it really got Sarah and I thinking about, what kind of goals we have to accomplish in our outdoor adventures. I think one of those first goals is visiting our local national park, Voyageurs National Park in northern Minnesota. We've been to the Superior Hiking Trail, we've been to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, we've been to various state parks throughout Minnesota, but we have yet to get to our state's only national park.
Yeah, it was one of those reminders that you have this beauty pretty much in your own backyard, and we kind of preach that all the time. You don't need to go to this magical high mountaintop to get outside. You can go somewhere close to home, and that's our next challenge, close to home.
Maybe we'll have to do it this spring or early summer while we still have our Parks Pass. We bought last year during our road trip a annual pass to visit all of the national parks. What it does is you have this pass, it's good for a year, and you get free admittance to all of the national parks and various national monuments or historical sites that charge an entrance fee. So it's a very cost-effective way if you do plan on visiting multiple national parks within the year. So Sarah and I purchased this because we did on our road trip visit a number of national parks like Acadia National Park.
The one in Ohio.
Oh yeah, Cuyahoga Valley, Glacier National Park, Yellowstone National Park. I believe that was it, but yeah, we found it very, very useful in our travels.
Yeah, and it's, like Andy said, super cost effective. I think it was only $80 for the whole year.
Yeah, it was $80, and just visiting one national park can cost you about $30.
So we really hope you enjoyed that interview. And if you're still thinking about a holiday gift for someone, maybe consider buying Trekking the National Parks for your outdoor person in your life.
We'll have a link to the board game in the description of this episode, along with John and Terry's personal blog.
And as always, thanks for listening. We love sharing these stories with you through the Hiking Through Life podcast, and we're so grateful that you listen to this podcast. If you'd like to support the Hiking Through Life podcast further, we have these amazing new t-shirts and water bottles. The t-shirts come in 4 colors,
and the water bottles are perfect for trails, adventuring, or daily use. Consider checking them out at hikingthroughlife.net/shop.
Use the code PODCAST and receive 10% off your first order.
Much like going on a new trail or hike for the first time, creating your own podcast can be daunting and scary. But we at Hiking Through Life have found that Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. And the best part is that it's free and it's all right at your fingertips from your phone or computer. The creation tools on Anchor allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds just as you want it. And then they'll distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard everywhere like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more areas where podcasts can be heard. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. If you're ready to start creating your path of podcasting today, go ahead and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You've been listening to the Hiking Through Life podcast. Peace, love, and hike through life.